Okay. So I got into creative financing. I've been a real estate investor for the last 22 years. And really what happened for me is I learned the art of how to buy real estate without using banks, without using money. And that really spoke to me. That really made me have a lot of aha moments of how I could scale our business. We were already buying properties the conventional way. I didn't know in 2008 that when we'd buy a house with cash and then rehab it and then rent it out and then I'd refinance it and I would use that money to buy another property. I didn't know that was called BRRRR back then, but that's what we were doing. My wife and I in 2008, when there wasn't a lot of buyers in upstate New York, we were finding deals for $30,000 to $40,000 on single family homes that we could cash flow very easily $300 to $400 a month on. So it really made sense for us to buy these properties. But then lo and behold, we also realized if we're going to scale, going to the bank every single time, there had to have been a better way. So my coach, my mentor, Ron LeGrand, I bumped into one of his courses where he talked about the pretty house business. The pretty house business is the art of buying houses, what they call creative finance. So what does that mean? I'm not going to a bank. I'm not going to get my credit checked. Most of the time we buy with no money down. So what do those deals look like, right? And how do we get these deals? One of the biggest things that we always hear is how do you convince somebody to say yes to terms, right? How can that benefit a seller? And there are many ways, guys. And I want to also take a second to thank you guys for joining our new group. The purpose of our group is our team personally does probably 7, 8 to 10 of these deals per month nationwide. We do a lot in Florida. We do them a lot around the country. Now we tend to we want to close on half of those. We also assign a lot of those to other investors. Sometimes they're a homeowner. So in a lot of these situations, that group is where we're going to showcase a lot of our deals that are available because we can't close on every single one of them ourselves as much as I would love to. So there's going to be a showcase of deals that we've already had negotiated the terms. You're going to negotiate everything already for you, and you could walk into a deal most of the time with just paying some closing costs and our assignment fee. We do have what's called a cost of entry form for you, and we're going to go over that right now. So when we analyze a creative finance deal, how we visualize this deal is, does this whole thing make sense to us? If it's a deal that we're going to say yes to, what are those factors? So everybody buys houses the typical old-fashioned way, and the first thing that we're going to look at is price, right? And that's what everybody always looks at is, what's my price? What's this house worth? What's my price? So when you're buying terms houses the way we do, price is still very important, but that's actually the least important as far as what I'm concerned in. So what do I mean by that? Things that we analyze these deals. So there's a key factor. So if you've got paper, you're gonna wanna write this stuff down. I'm gonna give you the things that I look at. Now I have an acquisition manager. Her name's Brittany. She's been working for us the last full year and a half. She's full-time. I don't talk to sellers anymore, guys. We've got employees who do all that. I've got a full-time acquisition. We've got on staff a transaction coordinator. I've got a full-time acquisitionist. I've got part-time acquisitionist. I have folks who do the tech for us. And actually some of our team are right here in this room with us. So we have students in this room that we teach this, because we do teach this to students who are doing very well with the same things that we're doing. So when all of us get these leads that come in, we ask a series of questions. We ask the same series of questions every single time. And what we'll do is we're going to find out if this is a good fit for seller financing or if this will be a good fit for a cash deal. By the answers we get back from our sellers, they're going to dictate to us the way that deal is going to look. If it goes to a cash deal, we have a system for that. If this heads towards a creative finance deal by our questions, we'll start asking these questions. But once they say, yes, Joe, team, this does work for us, what are the steps to process that deal? Just because a seller says yes to terms does not mean it's a good deal, right? So here's what we look at. Number one, cost of entry into a deal. For me, that's my most important thing. If I'm going to be getting into a deal, what's my cost of entry? So you'll hear us showcase and brag around, hey, no money down to the seller. Sure, that's true. But there's other costs that go into that. We actually have a cost of entry worksheet that we have our acquisition team fill out. So when a seller says yes to terms, I would sell my house on terms. The first thing I'm going to want you to do is fill out your cost of acquisition sheet. And this is going to give us an itemized list of things that will figure out what's my entry fee into this deal. So what does that look like? I'm going to go over that real quick. I don't have all of it in front of me, so I'm going to share it into our group. So you guys will actually have the one that our team uses, okay? So a seller says, Joe, I need $10,000 down. And we agree to $10,000 down, or we say, is that the best you can do? They say, fine, we agree on $5,000 down. We agree on $5,000 down, add that to my list of cost of entry, right? Now, part of when you buy a house on terms, our buyers are generally not getting any cash or very little. And if they need that $5,000, it's typically for something. So part of when we make a terms deal, we pay our half of the closing costs, but we also pay their half too. So I want to figure out what my closing costs are in their deal, because I can't expect to buy somebody's house on terms and then expect them also to show up to closing with $3,000. You'll lose so many deals if you expect that to happen. So you have to consider that a cost of doing business is I'm going to pay both sides of closing costs. So before you commit to that, figure out where you're buying, what a typical price house would look like if you were to do it with, seller financing. Figure out what your transfer taxes are, or recording fees and things like that. So before you offer to pay all the fees, you at least want to have an idea what you're looking at. But I will tell you, there are some places where cost of entry for closing costs could be kind of high. There are some that they're not that bad at all. It could be only a few $1,000s. In some places like Arizona, it's almost free. And then you get into places like Baltimore or even Chicago, and they could have some high transfer taxes and things like that. So that's why there are lease purchases, and that's a different story. But what's my cost of entry? So I'm going to share that worksheet with you guys. So if you have somebody that says yes to terms, the first thing you're going to want to do is fill in all of these questions, and it's going to throw a number right in your face. So what we look at is the deals that we're going to keep in house versus deals that I'm going to have for other investors, right? And we're going to have certain boxes that they have to fit into. The deals I love, put an asterisk next to this one, guys. I'm giving you the gravy here. Low cost of entry. Those are the winners right there, okay? High cost of entry is going to kill a deal for you, or if you're going to assign that deal to another investor. Because what we do, we are actually, a lot of investors are wholesalers. They wholesale a lot of deals. Everybody who wholesales cash deals. We are one of the only ones that exclusively wholesales seller finance and sub 2 deals. We're one of the very first people are doing the whole country, and we're doing it consistently. So these are the things that we really look at as a cost of low entry. I want you guys to get into a deal with as little out of pocket as possible, because this is what's going to help you be able to buy more deals and be able to save capital for other things, right? So high cost of entry will kill a deal. What does that look like? What's high cost of entry mean? And I could go over a scenario real quick. I had a seller in my own city. He would do a deal with no money down. He gave me a 30-year term to get him cashed out. He had 60,000 of equity in the deal that he left there, knows he's giving me 30 years to get him cashed out. And he was fine with it because I paid his price, which was $290. Okay. I had to pay $5,000 in closing costs. I own this property now, no credit, no banks needed. I paid $5,000 in closing costs. I bought this house for $290. $1,700 payment is what it is. Big, huge house, swanky area. We sell that on a lease purchase for $400,000 to a tenant buyer who gives us $28,000 to move in. And we rent that for $3,000 a month. So I'm getting positive cash flow. I've got all my money back from the $5,000 I put out when I got my $28,000 down payment. And I have it sold to them at a fair price because the estimate's like $420 on the property. And everybody says, why would he do this? Because he tried to list it right before COVID and didn't have a sale. And he was tired of making that $1,700 payment and said, I just want to be done. And I'm flexible when I could take my equity. I'm not in a hurry. It was a Airbnb property. Worked out very well for everybody. He's thrilled. He says, I know you're going to make money on it because I follow you guys on social media and I can't wait to see the family you put in there. He knows what we're doing. He's happy about it. So the scenarios could work really well. Low cost of entry, zero down to the seller, but we had $5,000 in closing costs. We had to pay a $1,000 insurance policy. We have a $1,700 payment. We had to make 4 payments on before we found the tenant buyer. Add all of that stuff up. We have utility bills we had to pay in the meantime. I had guys go there and put up smoke alarms and do the windows and clean the place because all it needed was a cleaning. It was beautiful. But when you add all of that up, and then I have employees because we have all the staff to do. So total out of pocket in that deal for me was almost $20,000. Right? So cost of entry and a no money down deal, because I have staff involved in CRMs and marketing and all the other things. But if you're doing this out of your own house, your cost of entry could be a lot less. But these are the things that will look at these deals and could be hurtful or not. Number two, write this down, term length. On these creative finance deals, this is the second most important thing to me is term length. So term length, why is that so important to me? If I have a seller who agrees to seller financing, but wants me to get them cashed out in 6 months, not interested. That's putting him under way too much pressure. Unless I'm getting some big, huge discount. And I could go over a couple scenarios where this will work out really well. But majority of the time, I'm talking years, not months. And to be quite honest with you, the questions that we ask and the way that we ask it, 100% of the time with our training, the seller tells us the number. And I get 10, 20, 30 years constantly. Our team does. Some scenarios, they might want 5 to 7 years, right? But I won't put myself into a short term because that is very hard to do. So for an example, if I'm buying a house at a fair price and there's a downturn in the market in the next couple of years, this is going to really be something I want to look forward to happening. So I don't want to have a short term to where I have to get them refinanced in a short way. If they give me a 20-year term or a 30-year term like the last gentleman, if the market goes down, but I'm still cash flowing $1,200 a month and it comes back around, I don't care. I've got plenty of time. So long-term, low entry fee, here it is. I'm giving you guys the bread and butter. Low entry fee, long-term, things I love. Things I hate, high entry fees, especially high entry fees with short terms, kiss of death, not interested. Hate that stuff. Pass on those deals all the time. Seller says, yes, I will do that, but I want half down and you got to get me cashed out in the next 6 months. Beat it, not interested, pass. He's a suspect. He's not even a prospect. I'll put him in the 30-day follow-up folder. And this is what we do. Okay. It's not even really a folder. It's a CRM. Next really big important thing for me is monthly cash flow. Okay. So monthly cash flow is important and how you underwrite it is equally important. So what does that mean? When I buy a property subject to, I have one right now in Port Charlotte, Florida. The buyer, when he bought it for less years ago, but obviously the house has gone up in value. House got an ARV of 525 to 550. We made a deal at 460, but he needs 80 grand down. He gave us a 10-year term. His payment with everything is only $2,200 a month with everything included on a $500,000 house. So if you were to buy a $500,000 house, your payment would be screaming high, especially right now at 6%. The terms that we're able to take over, he gave us a 10-year term and his interest rate's only 3%. So when you buy a property subject to, the benefit of that is we're taking over their existing mortgage payment that's not going into our own name, but it's now our mortgage because we're paying it, but I'm paying a mortgage at 3%. Not only that, they've been living in the house for 7 years. So in the first handful of years where that's mostly interest, when you're into 5, 6, 7 years, you're paying obviously more principal, less interest. So I'm in a better place in the loan. More of my payment is going to go towards that principal because I'm in year 7 of that loan because I'm just taking over from where they left off, right? Now, this house is going to be able to rent for $3,700 a month. We ran the Airbnb statistics on it too, and it can because it's a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom, 2,800 square foot house on the water. Built in 1998 on a really decent sized lot. Nice house. It needs carpet and paint. That's it. So we bought it right. And now this could be either a long-term rental that I could put in a tenant buyer. I could do a lot of things with this property, right? But it's going to cash flow right off the bat if I'm able to rent it for $3,700 a month. With our tenant buyers, sometimes we get a little bit more than that. And my underlying payment's only $2,200. So I'm in a scenario where cash flowing in these properties, $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 a month is not out of the norm for us. Cost of entry, always trying to keep it low as possible. But however, I don't love the deal because it does have a higher cost of entry. 80 grand's a lot. But after I give them that 80 grand, my balance is only 380,000. And I have a $550,000 house that's just pumping out money for the next 10 years. And my buy down rate is so good on it. It's a long-term play. Right. And this is the benefit of that. If the market takes a little bit of a dive in 2 or 3 years and it comes back, because it always will. I've been around the first time it hit in 2008. I knew what it was like in 2004 and 5, because that's when I was doing deals. In 2006, I watched what happened. Anybody could buy a house. And then 8 crashed, 9 was worse, 10, was pretty bad. And then, it comes back. So what I don't want to do is have a lot of money out of pocket on properties that aren't cash flowing. So I need to make sure that it's going to cash flow as a rental. Even if I intend to do an Airbnb out of it, just in case regulations change or I change my mind, I know I could go back to a rental and I know I could still cash flow out of it. So cash flow for me and how I'm going to beat the downturn and how I'm going to beat this downturn is I'm going to be buying properties without using my credit, without using banks, very little money into the deals, and I'll be buying it into cash flowing properties. That's the secret, right? I don't want to be dumping my own personal loans in them. I don't want to be able to pay 6-7% of the bank right now when I could buy these deals. Some of the seller finance deals that we do are at 0% or 2-3% or less. So we negotiate 0% deals all of the time. So these are some of the benefits of having that. So with seller finance deals on free and clear properties, you can negotiate the payment. If you're taking over a property subject to the underlying debt and you're taking over that payment, that's usually what it is. You can't negotiate off of that. But on a seller finance deal, you could do interest only payments. You could do super low payments. You could do a lot of more flexibility. So making sure if there's a downturn, you're building yourself in enough cash flow to be able to still cash flow, even if market is hot or not. Last but not least, number 4. So number 1, cost of entry. Number 2, length of term. Number 3, cash flow, and then free equity. So getting some equity in these deals, what do I mean by that? The last gentleman, I bought the house for $290. I sold that for $400,000 on a lease purchase. The reason I sold it for $400,000 because I'm not selling today. They're going to get me cashed out in 2 to 3 years, right? Even though those estimates now I think will be plenty fine. But the case of it is, I want to see if I could get into a deal with free equity. What I won't do is buy a $500,000 house for $700,000 just because they say yes to terms. I want to still walk into a good position, right? But would I buy a house that's a $700,000 house? Would I buy it for $700,000 if I had very low cost of entry? I had a super long length of term. I had a ton of monthly cash flow. Sure, I would do that deal. Why wouldn't I? Right? I got 30 years. I might have a no 0% interest rate or a super low interest rate, and I'm cash flowing like a monster, and it didn't cost me anything to buy the deal in a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood. I would take that deal all day long. So this is why for me, price is important, but it's not everything. So how do we kick other investors' butts? When somebody talks to a seller and they say, I'm a cash buyer and I need to buy your house at 70% off minus repairs, 75% off minus repairs. How do you sell it to somebody who's got a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood who wants full price? I can do that. I got into a seller call today with a gentleman in Colorado. He wants $900,000 for his property. He knows it's worth 1.1. He's like, I just want $900,000 for my property. I owe 186. I've got 700,000 of equity. We moved out, built a new house. I rented it for a year. I don't want to be a landlord. I'm an accidental landlord. So we say, we'll buy for $900,000. We'll take care of the closing costs. I'll take your $1,700 payment. And then how long until you will let me give you the rest of your equity? And we're trying to work that out now to see if he's going to give us a 5-year term. He already agreed to a 10-year term, and he wants to make sure that's okay with the wife. So if we take over his $1,700 payment and buy it for $900,000, knowing it's worth 1.1 million, we're in a really good position there. We get cash flow like a monster out of that deal. He doesn't need that $700,000 right now. And we all say, why would he do that? Right? Doesn't make any sense. He wants to hit an easy button. He lives hours away. He doesn't want to have to put the small repairs to redo the floors and a couple of the small things it needs. And if he could get that delayed cash sale for full price now, he's happy with it. And he's like, wait a minute, you're going to make the payments. So I'm almost like a landlord, but I'm not responsible for anything. I'm like, yup. And the insurances are in our name too, because we're the owner. So if somebody falls, they don't even call you, they call us. He's like, yeah, that sounds great. Let me talk to the wife. We're going to reconnect on Thursday. So when I talked to my student about this and we were sitting there saying, why would anybody do this? Because it's the easy button and it really does work. So things I look for. I'm going to put some asterisks out there and I move this along quickly. If the seller wants more money down, because we typically buy with no money down, but say the seller does need a down payment. If I'm going to look at a down payment, the one thing that I need to do is definitely get more time. So if I need to move one thing, something else has to move. There's 4 things I look at. Down payment, which is the cost of entry, my length of term, my monthly cash flow, and obviously the price. And if one moves, I have to move something else. You want a bigger down payment? I need longer time. Okay. These are the things I look at, and I'm really paying attention to that. So when I have a seller who says, I need $60,000 down and I need a 2-year term, well, if I were to give you $60,000 down, I'm looking at probably a 10 to 15-year term. And if we could agree on that, great. If not, we're moving along or figuring out the next step. And that's really what we do. I don't want to waste my time with people who are just not able to meet. We're very nice, but we follow up a lot. But I'm not going to fall in love with one deal if it doesn't fit for them and it's a good fit for us. So we work on just getting leads. Ideal deal. Real quick, what's my ideal thing? I'm going to go over it. No money down. Long term, 10 years to 30 years plus. No money down, 10 to 30 years plus. Monthly cash flow, I like 500 or better. And I know some of you are like, holy cow, that's a lot. But the thing is, when you're taking over that old existing payment, you'd be surprised how low some of these payments are because they bought the property for less. You're going to obviously have a little bit more room in there. And if it could be an Airbnb potential, I want to obviously do more than that. And I always check to see if it's available. And then I want to make sure I'm getting free equity in the deal. So that's the next thing. I want to get a free equity. So my ideal deals, low entry, long terms, good cash flow. I'm getting some free equity. If I get that deal, I am buying it. I'm scooping that up. I'm keeping it in-house, and it's a deal, right? What's my exit strategy is important. These are the things I look at on every deal, because the more ways you have of exit strategies, the more ways you could make some of these deals happen. So I like what's called a smart fix and flip is what we kind of call in-house. You might have a seller where they have a free and clear house. They're open to, they really want to get cashed out, right? It needs work. Maybe they inherited a home, right? And this happens to us a lot. You inherited grandma's home or mom's home and there's crap everywhere and you just don't know what to do with it. You might live out of state. You're overwhelmed. So we're able to buy the property once we agree on the price. And sometimes what we might do is what's called a smart fix and flip, to where if it's a free and clear property, I might be able to buy the property for $400,000, but I'm not paying a dime for the property. I might cover just closing costs with a lien on it or a note on it for that $400,000 that I owe the seller. Agreeing that what I'm going to do on my end is with my capital, I'm going to rehab the property. I'm going to put it on the market right away with the best realtor in town, and then we're going to sell it. And when they do, we all get paid. But I'm going to take care of all the expenses. I take care of all the rehab. I'm boots on the ground. I'm going to coordinate everything. So once you agree on your $400,000, if you don't need it tomorrow and you could give me a year to less, because it'll take me 3 months to rehab it, a month on the market, 2 months to whatever close. So I'm looking at it on that 6 month, but I always write it up for a year just in case it's on the market for a little bit longer. But the goal is to get them cash out in less than a year. So sometimes people might need the money, but they don't want to wait 10, 20 years. But you might have that smart fix and flip. So there's deals, I'm not going to do a major rehab, but if it's a small one, where there's been some of these where I paid $2,000 for closing. I've done a clean out of the property, it cost $3,000. I list it with a realtor and you made $26,000 net, right? Didn't do much besides just a clean out. So sometimes they might need a little bit of paint. Sometimes they might just need something as simple as a clean out. So these are some of the things that we look at for that smart fix and flip. You could turn it into a rental. You could turn it into an Airbnb, right? It's your property. You could turn it into a midterm rentals, or something like with traveling nurses. That's kind of hot right now too. So we're something where Airbnb doesn't work, but you might have traveling nurses close to hospitals where they're going to be on assignment for 3 months. And then we also love the rent to own, lease purchase with tenant buyers. We love that strategy, and that's actually one of our favorite ones. And that's for a different class, but once you understand why, you'll fall in love. So things that I normally look at is locations, obviously important. Is this in a location I normally keep the property, or is it a location where I don't? Because my thought is, if I get a great deal on a great property and it's a location I keep it in, then fine, I'll keep it. But what if it's a great house, a great deal on a great property, and it's in an area I don't normally buy in, maybe I don't have boots on the ground there. We assign those deals to other investors who are looking for that deal. And we give it to you on a silver platter with everything from A to Z done for you. We have a transaction coordinator in-house who will help facilitate the attorneys. We have attorneys who walk through the whole process who know how to do it. So you are set up everything the correct way. So we really try to be mindful on process. We are very big on that. The success is in the details. So a few warning I want to give you. Things to be careful of. I got 3 and then we're wrapping it up. Number 1, you always want to make sure that you're getting cash flow if it's a rental property. Even if your intentions are, I'm going to do an Airbnb, if regulations change and you can't do an Airbnb there anymore, and you got to fall back to a rental, you got to make sure you're able to cash flow. You don't want to put yourself in a negative spot to where plan A fails and plan B is now costing you hundreds per month. That makes sense, everyone? Number 2, be careful when you're buying a property on terms. They might get reassessed and your taxes and your escrow might change. Okay. So I bought a house from Bob and Nancy for $180,000, but when they bought it 8 years ago, they bought it for less than that. The town had it assessed at much less, right? But now I come in with a new purchase price and the town reassesses it. The taxes go up. When I thought I was making X amount per month, drops. I know of scenarios of people who've done this, which is my next one to warning about, is tax codes change sometimes from primary residence to non-primary residence, right? So I buy Bob and Nancy's house, that this was their home, this was their primary residence. Maybe they were getting some type of deduction through the town. There's like star exemptions and different exemptions you get. But now the town finds out that they moved. Now you don't get that discount anymore. Now it's an investor, an LLC property owned, and then they're going to see that, and it might be at a different tax rate. Not only that, you might have a reassessment if you bought it for a higher price than it was assessed at, and you could find yourself in a position where your taxes increase. So before you do that, this is where I say you want to make sure that you're building in plenty of cash flow into these deals to make sure when you're renting it, it's okay. Check with the municipality, see if any things are going to change as far as tax codes go. Do your research before you say yes to a deal so you don't get caught in a catch-22 later on. From an example I have had where somebody that I know is an investor, he's in North Carolina, did a couple of these deals. He believed he was cash flowing a few hundred a month. Once a new tax thing changed, because it wasn't primary residence anymore, he was negative cash flow, 500 a month each property. And I will tell you, when that happens, that's not fun. So just protect yourself on that, guys. So that's that. So a couple of questions I kind of want to dig into real quick. So I'm actively looking to buy in Milwaukee, in Southwest Wisconsin. Okay. How do you close on a house deed that already has a bank position with a lien? Great question. So the most mortgages, the deed is the first position. So what we do is, so the question is, and when we buy a house, how do I do it with creative finance, knowing that there's a lien on it from the bank? Is that pretty much everybody's question? So when you do that, you could buy the property subject to, or you could buy it. What I do is on a wrap mortgage, which is very, very similar. They do have some small differences. So what I'm doing on a wrap mortgage is with, and I'll give you the scenario, is the first deal that I'm talking about was we bought it for $290. My seller owes $230 to Wells Fargo. His $1,700 payment. So what a wrap mortgage does is to my seller is a piece of paper. It's a promissory note written by an attorney or a title company. But all it says is this is a purchase between my trust to the seller at a $290,000 price, that I am taking his payment exactly what it is, and I'm getting it at the same buy down rate of what it is. I itemize exactly how much equity is in that deal for the seller at $60,000. And so my piece of paper just shows that my company now has a mortgage between me and my seller. It's just an agreement. It's just a document is all it is. So what I'm filing is going to be a second on that house. And that second is between me and the seller, if that makes sense. So once you file that with your municipality and it's recorded, you bought the property, it's a closing just like any other closing. And the difference is you're not applying for new financing, you're just doing the existing financing in place. And a lot of times what it is, some of you might remember like assumable mortgages, where you would have to actually have your credit checked and apply to take over somebody's existing mortgage. That used to be a really big thing back in the day. Well, it's kind of like doing an assumable mortgage, but without assuming it, right? You can still close on the property. That old loan still stays out there, but it stays in their name. I'm not putting it in my name. And it's very similar to that. But I'm not using my credit. I am not assuming their loan. The loan is staying in their name. They know it, and they know that we'll be making payments on their behalf. The neat thing about it, big questions that come up a lot. What happens if they want to buy another house? This is why we love the wrap mortgage, because this shows a document that they easily can show to a lender showing that we're making the payments. I had this happen often about 2 weeks ago on the property I was telling you about. He's buying another house. A local credit union here in Rochester called me up and says, hey, Joe, so-and-so is buying another property. I see this is on his credit report, and he says that you bought it. I said, yep, let me send you over the agreement I have showing that I'm making the payments. And if I need to show you my bank account where I have it automatically withdrawn every month because I do it electronically, I could forward that to you as well if you need it. She says, I just think the first thing, just showing that it's you paying it and we're good to go. I sent that to him. He's squared away. Another one, we did the same thing. They said, yes, I want to have that original document. And then can you send me the bank statements too? Good to go. No questions asked. So what happens is with a wrap mortgage, why I love the wrap mortgage, it shows that I'm making that payment of $1,700 a month. So what happens is my incoming payment washes it out. So it's not affecting his debt to income. Not only is it not affecting their debt to income, these on-time payments are also helping their credit. So I'm helping their credit by having on-time payments, and it's not affecting their debt. So for a seller, there's, especially sometimes if they're late on their payments and we're helping them in a distressed situation, years later, you cannot believe the text messages that we get saying, where my credit score now, I'm a 780 because this has been paid on time for the last 2 years. You'd be shocked how many times that happens to us, guys. Because now we've maybe had an account that was past due, that we bought it this way on subject to our wrap mortgage, and we got it current, and now we've been paying on time for the last few years, and we're helping their credit. So if we're not affecting debt, we're helping their credit. These are two good ways that where we could work with the seller. And if we're the investor, I'm going to give you all a clue. If we're the investor that I could pay more than anybody else can, if we could agree on the rest of the terms, we're really in a league all on our own. So my Port Charlotte deal, we sold that from another investor because all the cash people were coming in way less. The guy's like, I know my house is nice. I know I'm giving it away at this price, but I'm not going to let investors steal it. That's just ridiculous. This is way too nice of a house. So when everybody's offering him way less than us, and here we are able to offer him much more if he's flexible on when he could get a whole lot of his equity, it could be a great win for him, right? Because he wants his price. And so many times, if you're able to meet their price, but the rest of the deal, like the other three things that we talked about, no money down, cash flowing and free, and maybe it's a lot of other things, you'd be surprised how easy that can be. Other questions we had, I'm gonna wrap that up. 60K in equity, how does that get paid to the seller? Great question. So the 60,000 of equity in our deal, I told the seller that we'll get them cashed out. And I tell them every single time, you've got $60,000 of equity in the deal. And I said, some folks love that when I buy their house, I'm taking care of their payment. I'm taking care of the insurance, the utilities, the maintenance, repairs. So you're free to walk away. You know, I'm taking care of everything for you. And because of that, some people will wait 20 to 30 years to get them cashed out. And he said, that's fine. I said, okay, I'm gonna rent this up for 30 years. If you get cashed out sooner, bravo. And he said, cool with me. It was just that simple. Then I run into some folks who need to get cashed out a lot sooner, like say 5 to 10 years. So my question to the seller is, if I were to buy your house at your price and take over your payments, what's the most amount of time you'd give me to get you cashed out? And you'd be shocked how many times they'll say 10 years, 15 years. How's this? How's that? Right. And if they say 6 months, whoa, I can't do that. And then we talk about it. So it's just these small little things, guys, that we do. So to answer the second part of your question on that 60,000 of equity, now our tenant buyer who buying it at 400,000 gives us $28,000 down. They still owe us 375-ish. Meanwhile, we're still paying down ours every single month, where their price is still staying the same. We're cash flowing $1,200 a month. 2 or 3 years down the road, they decide, I'm ready to get my mortgage, Joe, and get you cashed out. Once we get them cashed out, our buyer gets his $60,000 of equity. Or I'm sorry, our seller gets his $60,000 of equity. Wells Fargo gets paid off, and then we get probably a close to 6-figure check. And what did it cost me to get into that deal? It cost me some money up front, but I got that money back in a couple of months, like you knew. I've got no credit tied into it, no bank loans of mine tied into it, and I'm cash flowing $1,200 a month in the meantime. So this is why we love that strategy. Is there a prepayment penalty? There is not a prepayment penalty. So if our tenant buyer that we put into the property at that $400,000 price decides to buy it in 6 months or 6 years, guys, I have a 30-year term on that house and I'm making $1,200 a month. I hope they never cash out for like 20 years. But if they decide to cash out in 6 months and I get an $80,000 check, I won't cry. But I'll miss that $1,200 every single month. And I'll miss the depreciation that I get to write down. And because we do rent to own, we're not responsible for the maintenance, repairs, and utilities because our tenant buyers are. So we don't even have management or any of the calls because they're doing all that stuff and they know it. So this is why we love to do what we do. It becomes your equity. The owner knows they're giving that up. The 60,000 of equity is theirs and they know that in writing. So they do know that they have that money coming to them. Any other questions? I see a lot of folks wanted to buy. How do you find tenant buyer and convince them to rent to own? So here's the one thing, guys. If you look in a house in your city and you look for a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood, there's not usually any one of them that you'll see rent to own offered. You'll never see it. You're talking, the population of the country is less than 20% can qualify for a mortgage. It's probably like 17, 18%. So what happens is the benefit for us is our audience is not the 17%, our audience is the 80-something% of the population. Now, out of that 80%, we're only working with folks who we heavily screen. It's a $50 fee that they pay for, but the screening gives us a snapshot of what their credit looks like, their debt looks like, the property they're looking at buying. They give us a snapshot of they're going to take 18 to 24 months with our credit repair to get them mortgage ready. Sometimes they've got great credit and they're self-employed. Sometimes are good people that just had something bad happen to them and their credit took a dip, right? So we look at them and we look at every scenario. And in those scenarios, once they go through the screening and they have the appropriate funds to do the deal, and I'll be honest with you, if you got 28 grand down, you're sounding pretty darn good to me. So unless you're like a serial axe murderer or something's crazy is going on, like we're going to really talk about that deal. And it worked out very well for our buyers. And to be honest with you, most of them give us around 10% down to the purchase price. That's usually our target. So I don't convince them. We put out there that you're able to move into this house, pay rent, make it your own with a locked in price, and ask about our 2 to 3 year payment plan program. And I'll be honest with you, we get probably 200 to 300 leads a day when we put our properties out there. You'll have to hire somebody to filter all the people because majority of them don't have money. Like 95% don't have money. The 4% that do have money won't like the property because it doesn't have that or doesn't have that. And the 1% will be like, I've got money and I like the property, let's go. Just the way it happens. But you'll get a lot of calls. It's almost overwhelming. How do I work for you? We're always looking for good people. We got a team right now of 10 of us, but if you get help out in certain ways, we're always looking for extra help. Where do you get an attorney? Great question. So we really screen attorneys. I look for one that's doing business in your state. If you're working in Florida or a handful of states, drop a question in our group, the Creative Finance Playbook with Jen and Joe. If there's a state that you're in and you're looking for an attorney, because what all of you want to do is we have a transaction coordinator and her name is Chelsea. I'll have her do a little drop in the group so you know who she is. She's got connections at title companies, attorneys, and she's the one, once we get a deal in her contract, she sees that thing from front to back. She's the one messaging the attorneys. She's the one doing all of the things. So if that's something that you would like us to have a class on like this, a free one where everybody could come and ask her questions about processes, maybe drop that in a group and we'll see if that's something we'll do on the road. Because a lot of this is, guys, once you make a deal, it is far from over. Like this is kid gloves. You have to take this thing down to the end zone because these things explode on you all the time for one reason or another. So to have somebody who does this, especially knows what she's doing, and Chelsea is absolutely amazing. And if you see her, she is the most thoroughest person in America. Doesn't matter. She's ridiculous. So we're bringing her on full time too. But once again, we will probably have a class on that. What company do you use for your rent to own screening tenants? So write this down, everybody. It is called screenthetenant.com. We have an interview we did with the owner. I will drop that in our new group so you guys can watch it. He goes over the whole process, what they look for, how we get these folks mortgage ready, the whole process. It's so easy that you could text your people who are looking at your property a link. They pay for it. And then that link will give you the update of the progress. And usually less than 5 days, you're going to have your report card, 70 pages on each person, but then they give you like 2 paragraphs. So you don't have to read it all. But there's credit checks, debt to income, verification of employment, sex offender, criminal. You know if they could run the mile in under 7 minutes. I mean, it's pretty thorough, but maybe not the mile part, but it's pretty awesome. So screenthetenant.com. I'll drop that interview if you guys want to watch it in the group, but it's amazing. So if you want to get into that, it's super helpful because I see that question. So attorneys, I think I've answered that. Some states use attorneys, some use title companies. I always recommend still having an attorney look over your paperwork in your state, even if it's still a title state, just to have all your T's crossed and I's dotted. People say, you know, that's an extra fee, but I would rather do everything right up front than not and learn the hard way. There are some really good channels to watch as far as legal things. If anybody Googles, his name is Scott Horn out of Dallas, Texas. They run a lot of things on, he does a lot of small YouTube videos and things like that. This gentleman is one of the best in the entire country. And they could help you with closings in different states, almost be like a liaison to where they could overlook the deal. They perform deals in Texas, but he could oversee and have contacts in almost every state. So Scott Horn is huge for you guys. We use him a lot. He's going to be super busy, but he is a great one. Can you help new attorneys come online, the sub-2 way of doing business? Sure can. I've taught many attorneys how to do it. Usually for our students that we have, because we do have 15 students, and when our students make a deal, part of that deal process is now we have to find what your attorney is, and I need to make sure your attorney understands what we're doing and how to do this the right way. And if it's not, who is it, right? So there are some training that I go into it. I just want to make sure they understand seller financing, how to set it up the right way. Scott is an amazing resource as far as education on that. So I really recommend if you want to turning down there. And if you need help, obviously reach out to us too. And what I love to do is find attorneys who this is their thing, right? So I ask them, do you know how to do things like seller financing, subject to, do you know about wholesaling and how to do it? Have you done these before? You're right. So those are my 3 questions. Do you know how to do subject to? Do you know how to do like seller financing? And do you know how to do wholesaling? And then have you done them? And if they say yes to all that, I'm already gonna say, okay, cool. Let me pull up a chair and let's talk more about it. If they say no, pump the brakes, next, right? How do you advertise lead source? Oh, now we're getting to the good stuff. Secrets. No, we do some social media. We really primarily focus there. You'd be shocked how little it's still a lot, but how little we do spend for the amount of leads that we do get. I found social media to be the best return. We've done all of them except for text blasting, every other mail drop, cold calls, this, that, and the other thing. I really enjoy having sellers reach out to us, and our cost per lead is almost unbeatable by anybody. Usually if we're going nationwide, we're probably like $4 or $5 an incoming warm lead. I know the industry average is a little over 100. And I know if we're doing like Florida right now, we're pounding Florida. And I think we're probably like $7, $8 a lead, incoming warm leads. But once again, when you're doing Florida, it's like 100 something. So I really, Scott Horn is in Texas. Let me see if I could drop it in there real quick. He's in Dallas, Texas. And you know what I'll do, guys? How about this? Don't even bother looking it up. I'll drop one of his interviews in the group and then just like his YouTube channel because he's amazing. So I'm going to drop that right after this meeting in the Creative Finance book. So I'll lead you right to the source. But he's on Instagram. He's on things like that. Yeah, Facebook is where we've been running our ads, Mike. It seems to be the best pull that we're getting. You have, if you look at the statistics of how many people are on Facebook, it's staggering. usually some of the younger generation, like the teenies, to say, you know, I'm not on Facebook, but people who want to sell houses are sure on there. And they reach out to us in droves. And I've done mailers, and then you get the calls of how'd you get my stuff and things like that. But people reach out to you and they say, I have a house that's not been on the market yet, and I'm thinking of selling it. And they come into us. The conversations are usually a lot better, a lot nicer. And for us, our statistics, it's usually about 1 out of 85 or 1 out of 75 to 85 incoming leads is an actual deal for us. Cool. I think I got everything, guys. So I guess I'm going to wrap this up. If you guys, this is recorded, I'm going to share this back in the group for you guys later on if you want to recap. If you want to see more topics, we're going to do more of these. So if there's some things that you guys want to see, if there's some questions that you have, let's continue to do more of these. I definitely appreciate you guys all coming out today. And I want to kind of go over these topics more and more, because the one thing that I've noticed, guys, is no matter wherever you're getting your leads from, it doesn't matter. When you get that lead, what are you doing with it? That's going to be the difference. So some of these next things that we do that I'm teaching our students is how we're analyzing these deals. How am I breaking down this deal to see if this is a good deal or not? Because you'd be shocked how many times I've talked to a student or another investor and they say, I have this lead, but it's not a deal. And I say, well, why not? And then we start looking at it and I'm like, you're sitting literally on a deal right now. You just have to do this. And the look of the deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, really? Like, yes, like this is a deal. We make these deals, but this is how we do it. So it's really the successes in the small details. And I really want to kind of educate all of you guys on that stuff, because I know once you learn how to do this, you guys are going to want to be buying our deals more, right? You know how to do this stuff now. You feel good about it. So when I have these deals, you're going to understand how this stuff works. So it's going to be selfish for me to educate you guys for free, because when we have these amazing deals come across and you're looking for this and you really want something, if the right one comes across, we're going to be displaying them in this group first. You know, they're available, and we do it at a really good rate. So we want to be able to provide value for you guys. So let me know when's the next mentor session start. We do it every 6 months. We have open enrollment. We do a free meeting for about half an hour where I sit down with you and we kind of go over all of that. The next open enrollment is going to be like in the fall. We try to keep it as a one-on-one Zoom. We meet every single week. We go over a ton of stuff. We have a private group, which is a very, very small group, which is only about 50 of us. That's just for paid students and our personal team. So they get access to that. And we have got really cool other stuff. They get technology stuff that we're working on. So we'll be having that open enrollment. We'll do interviews probably like September. And I would guess it's going to start around October, November. So if you're interested in that, we'll be having stuff for that later on. But until then, like, I don't want you guys waiting for that. So I want to be able to do these. It's a lot easier for me to do this in a group of, 50, 60 people, 40 people versus the one-on-ones, because, it takes up a little bit of time. But cool. I'm going to wrap this up, gang. When we have the next one, I'll keep you toasted. In the meantime, thank you for coming out. I'm going to drop the attorney's information in there with some of the interviews that he's done. So go check that out. And if you guys have any questions in the meantime, please reach out. Love to chat. I will probably not get back to you immediately. I will certainly try, but my butt is in meetings from 8 o'clock in the morning till I go to bed sometimes. So I work full time. My team keeps me busy. So other than that, have a good one, guys, and we'll chat soon.